All right. Welcome back, Jordy, for another installment of Jordy and Fyfe hanging out, talking about business stuff. We still haven't named this, but super excited to dive in today. And what we have on the menu is for people that work way too much, but don't know how to stop, which is something I've struggled with. I've also helped coach a lot of people on this. I know you're very well versed in this and help people with this as well. So excited to dive in.
Yeah.
And actually, before we do that, just in case somebody doesn't know who we are and they end up listening to this, like do a quick intro for yourself, and maybe I should do the same.
Sure. I'm Jordy Tate, or Jordan, and I coach small business owners to grow their business while working less hours. So this is the core problem that I like helping people solve is how do you get more done in less time? And the reason I'm passionate about that is because I've coached hundreds of business owners and I've seen a lot who get stuck in this loop we're going to talk about, where the only way to get more growth is to put in more hours. And eventually you hit a ceiling and it gets pretty painful and difficult to change once you're there.
Yeah. I pretty much coach the same thing, but I'm especially working with entrepreneur dads. So small business owner dads, there's this added element of you're working with a family as well. Or you have a family on the side and you're trying to navigate both. So what's one thing that you notice with your clients or in your own experience with what people are noticing when they're working way too much and they're kind of trapped in that?
The things that I hear most commonly, I heard it today from someone, is I'm working 50, 60 plus hours a week. And often it's my work is bleeding into my nights, my weekends. I'm waking up earlier to try to catch up. It's like a capacity thing around hours. That's one of the pain points. Secondly, it's that parts of their life that are important to them are also falling away. So exercise is one of the first things to go when you start to get too busy with work. You feel too busy for exercise, so that goes. Then it's social time with friends. Then it's self-care and rest. And these parts of your life that are really important for sustainable and enjoyable way of living fall away in the name of doing more work to feel more caught up and to get on top of things.
Yeah. And I know from personal experience, when I'm not exercising, my diet gets worse. I'm not filling my cup in those ways. That's when like burnout is looming. I'm way more stressed. I'm way more on edge. My sleep's not as good. Like I'm noticing these other downstream effects that creep up, but it doesn't happen overnight, which is why I think it's so tricky, is like it is a slow compounding of it. So it's not like overnight you wake up and all of a sudden this happens. It's this slow burn that can kind of catch you off guard one day when you're like, what's happening? Like something's not right.
Exactly. It starts because you get too much on your plate one day, you have a hectic thing happen, and so you work a few extra hours and then you skip your exercise that day, or you work a few extra hours and you miss out on the social thing that you had planned. And that feels like, okay, that was a small sacrifice for today, but then maybe it happens again the next day or again the next week. And it starts to become a bit of a pattern. And I've been there myself too, where going to the gym or going for a run or going and seeing friends felt like, no, that's going to be draining, or I haven't gotten enough work done. I can't afford to do that. But part of the reason that this is so critical is you don't do those things in the same way that you knock things off your to-do list in your business. You do those things because they refill you, they recharge you. And when you're not making time for them, it's actually counterproductive for the things that you're trying to do, because as we'll talk about with the cycle, you get into a pattern where like you're not taking care of yourself. You're more tired. You got to work harder. And it all starts to compound and feel more and more difficult. And then also feels more difficult to break through and get back to living the way you want to live, working the hours you want to work, taking care of yourself and your family in the way you want to do.
Well, I think that's a good segue into actually mapping this out visually, which is actually something I did with a client on a call one day. So we'll just kind of go through what does this cycle actually look like? Because sometimes seeing it visually makes it a lot more apparent in our own lives. So generally where this starts is you're here in the middle and you say something along the lines of, or you notice that you're working too much. And one of the signals that you're working too much is you're feeling tired. That can just be one of the signals, but some of the other signals might be what we mentioned before with you're not exercising, or your diet's worse, or any of those signals that burnout might be coming your way. And feel free to chime in as I'm drawing this out, Jordy. And then the next thing that often happens is because you're feeling tired, because you're working too much, you really want to catch up. You want to make sure that you're not falling behind. You want to make sure your business is going well. And often there's a sense of guilt for self-care. Or you feel guilt because you need to spend time with your family immediately after, and there's no space for yourself. But this feeling of guilt seems to be a really common thread when people are in this cycle of overwork. And then from here, there's no recharge time. And recharge means different things for different people. But it's whatever those things are that create the ability for you to fill your cup. So it might be white space, it might be doing some hobbies, it might be just dropping out or spending time with your family. And because you don't have that recharging time, there's more stress and anxiety, and they're more tired. And same thing with over here. You're probably doing even less exercise or even worse diet. And then this leads to a lack of productivity. And then you're like, I need to work more. Hopefully people can read my writing. And then that kind of brings us back to, I'm working too much. How does this match with what you see with your clients and just your own experience?
Yeah, it's totally the loop people get caught in. And like we hit on, it doesn't happen on purpose. It doesn't happen overnight. But when you are skipping exercise, skipping rest, struggling to turn your brain off, and that guilt is driving you, it doesn't lead to more productive days. It doesn't lead to more focus. It doesn't lead to the type of lifestyle you want. It actually just takes you further away. And then the reason it's so negative and difficult for people is, like you hit on, you're not as productive. So you now need to work. You feel the need to work harder.
And then it like reinforces itself because you get back here like, oh, I'm even farther behind, or there's even more to do. And like, I don't know, it just keeps going and going until it becomes your default. Like this is the habitual way of work. And we don't really know a different way when we're so deep in it. And usually when you're super burnt out and tired, it's hard to see things for what they really are because you're trying to catch up. So how do we break the cycle? What are some things for you that have helped you, things that have helped clients?
So first is that recognizing when you're overworking, you can't work yourself out of it, as I've already said. So how do you slow down and how do you work a little bit less and create that time to recover, recharge, and to think more clearly so that you don't need to work so hard to get it all done? The way I start with clients is we look for 5 or 10 hours a week that we can eliminate from their calendar right away to just create capacity. And often that's work that's not urgent, that they're prioritizing, or work that feels really urgent but isn't as important as they've been making it. And by saying these are things that maybe we will get to in the future, or maybe we won't, but we don't have to do them today, this week. By that space, it really creates a big difference when you get that capacity back. And once you have the capacity back, then I recommend filling it with a couple of new things that are not work related, that will create boundaries or ways for you to break the cycle. So, we talk about exercise. For me, I love to end my day with exercise, because when I know I have a yoga class or a run with a friend or a workout planned at 4:30 or 5, I can't physically be sitting at my desk working at that time. So I know during my day that I need to get stuff done between now and then. And then I also know that I've got time booked in to take care of myself and get off the laptop and go move my body. And by moving my body, I also recharge, clear my head, and I come back with more energy the next day. So those are two really helpful ways. And the third I would say is considering the guilt, which is a really common part of business. I think that guilt drives the wrong short-term behavior. So if you feel guilty about slowing down or taking time off or not getting it all done, it forces you to work more in the short term. But I think more about what do you want to feel like long term in your business? How do you want to show up every day, every week? And if guilt is driving you and it's keeping you trapped in that cycle, how can you shift your mindset around that to recognize that you are working really hard, you are doing enough? And if you're going to be doing this for the long run, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years or more, you need to enjoy the ride a bit more, and you need to be a little bit easier on yourself as you go.
Yeah, we were talking about this before we started recording, and making the analogy of high-performing athletes. High-performing athletes are not training and working out 24/7. They have active recovery. There's white space in there for their body to heal and their mental game to sharpen. But I don't see that as much in entrepreneurship, because I think there's a different level of responsibility and ownership of making things happen all the time. And we don't treat our business the same way as we treat our body, like as in sport necessarily.
The business is always there. There's always more to do. A big part of breaking through this mindset is recognizing you will never get it all done. You'll never get to the bottom of the to-do list. And accepting that, and accepting that if you work really hard, 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day, if you couldn't get it done in that time, it cannot be as important to you as you think it is. As taking that extra hour and going to the gym, as spending time with your loved ones, as getting an extra hour of sleep so that tomorrow you can get a good, productive 8 or 10 hours instead of a slow, draining 12 or 14 hours, That's really what happens with this cycle. I find most people, when they're in it, it's survival mode. And you're just, like you hit on, you're just going. You're doing it every day. And then eventually you either hit a breaking point where you have to slow down and you have to change, and that's difficult. Or you recognize that there's a couple things I could change now that will make this more bearable, more manageable. And when I do that, not only will I have more time to enjoy my life, but my business will probably be better as well, because I won't be reacting. I'll be taking more control.
Yeah. One thing, I think you said it, but you can't work your way out of the cycle. You can't work yourself harder to get out of the cycle, which I think for a lot of entrepreneurial type people, that's one of the big tools they wield. It's like the hammer that they use because it's helped them be successful. But this is not something where the hammer works. Like, you need to have a different cycle. You just need to like change the cycle and break it. And like visually, I was taking a client through this visual. That's how this all came to be. I had him look at this and I was like, so how are you going to break the cycle? He's like, I need to exercise. I was like, really? Okay, that's interesting. And for him, it was, he wanted to bike to work every day. That was going to be one of his ways of like putting a block in here and creating some space for himself to break the chain and just create even just like half an hour of space. And that has slowly gotten a little bit bigger and bigger and has led to other areas of creating more white space and more recovery time.
That's awesome. That's such a good story because it wasn't a huge complicated shift. He didn't break his business. He literally just made time for himself in a day. And I find that once you do that and you get the positive reinforcement of how good that feels, it makes it easier to do more of it.
Yeah.
And that's where you go from this negative cycle to a more positive cycle where you're working a more balanced schedule. You're taking care of yourself. You're showing up rested and productive. And because of that, you're able to get the work done that you need to in the 8 or 10 hours you work. And therefore, when you go home, you don't have to feel tired and guilty and stressed. And you can get back to enjoying your life again.
Yeah. I figured it would be helpful just to show this more on like a calendar view. This is how Fyfe draws a calendar, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
But you were talking about creating boundaries with work. So you do your exercise at the end of the day. And again, I'm very visual, so I figured I'd map this out visually. This is 9 o'clock a.m. This is 5 p.m. That's kind of normal working hours. And what I found to be really helpful is, again, creating these boundaries and commitments that force me to stop or start working at certain times. So, especially during the pandemic, I think a lot of people struggled with this because there was nothing else to do. So, work started to bleed into like the entire day. And we have Sunday and Saturday on here. My work hours are now like 9:20 to about 4:30. And I've gotten so much more productive in that amount of time. And it's forced me to prioritize in a way better way. I'm a lot more diligent and discerning with what I'm committing to. And the reason my hours are so tight like that is I do pick up and drop off for my daughter at daycare. So I have a very hard start and stop time, which has created that boundary for me, which has really helped me stop my workday, which was one of my issues before, in that I would be tired at the end of the workday, but I just need to get one more thing done. Or I could get this couple more emails done. And then all of a sudden it's like 6:30, and this time here, kind of like 4 to 6, pretty useless time. I was doing, quote unquote, doing stuff, but it wasn't very productive. And I think that's kind of the visual for me is, if this is all black because you're working, how do you start to like create some white space in there for a workout midday or a workout at the end of the day that really defines and bookends the start and end of your day?
What I like about this is if you just rely on discipline to, I'm going to tell myself when I'm done work, or I'm going to stop work at this time and go do this thing, discipline wanes. And so maybe you do it a day and then the next day you're tired and you don't get there. But when you create structure through commitments, through other parts of your life, it's much easier to follow through and to actually show up in the way you want to. And you don't have to rely on the discipline that you're just going to figure it out. For me, what you hit on is so true. That last hour or two of a day where you're just like kind of lost and you're wondering, what am I doing? Those hours aren't adding any value and they're not getting you where you want to go in your business, but they are taking away from your life.
Yeah. And again, it's just like, maybe it's just 15 minutes at the start of your day and the end of your day. And you just, actually, that doesn't make sense with the way I drew that, but let's say it's just 15 minutes you gain, and then you add 15 minutes in the middle of the day. That white space that you create allows you to be more discerning with creating more white space. And it's like, oh, maybe I can like bring in a little bit more here and a little more active recovery here. But when it's so packed, people are so busy that they can't see how to make the changes they need to make. And I think that's maybe the message that I would leave people with is like, prove to yourself that you can create a little bit of white space for yourself or a little bit of recovery time so you can have the awareness and space to reflect and make more changes. Because once you crack that door, you can see the evidence and start to make more changes, which allows for more space, which allows for more prioritization. It's just like, again, the cycle we saw before was negative spiral. There's a positive spiral on the flip side.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that everything we've hit on is really important. And the question that I ask when people are feeling that overwork is, how much longer can you maintain working and living like this? And if the answer isn't 3 or 4 or 5 years, then the way you're working is leading you towards a cliff where it's your decision is going to get taken out of your hands. It's going to be forced on you. So it's much easier to break that pattern before you're totally entrenched and burnt out by making some of these simple changes, by committing a little bit of time to yourself, like you've hit on. And even half an hour a day adds up to hours a week.
Thanks for joining. We'll get better at these like intros and outros, but that's what we had today.
Yeah, I hope this helps someone.
Yeah, that's what we're doing it for. Hopefully help bring some clarity and some awareness. So let us know what you think.